Before we get started, it's really interesting that as an indie published author, how many people are interested in audiobooks, having their works produced as audiobooks, but they have no idea where to start. I have actually assisted several indie authors in the process of creating audio editions of their books. And it's really interesting because most self-published and indie authors, they're about the writing, the whole, technical process about creating audio editions. They have to, if they want to do audio editions, they have to learn it sometime. I never had any help personally from anybody to figure out how to do an audio edition. So I have been happy to give other authors a leg up on this topic. I love being an indie author, even though there's a lot more work associated with it. A lot of it has nothing to do with the actual writing. This is one of those topics, but it's a really great topic. Once you learn the bells and whistles of the whole thing, it is actually not all that hard to actually get audiobooks started. Also, I like the technology of Zoom. This is one of the beneficial things of COVID, is that most of the writers groups that I attend actually use Zoom now to really good effect, including presentations like this. So at least we got that going for us. So we'll start off by talking about me just a little bit. I could spend a whole hour talking about me, as expected. My first novel was published on March 31st of 2015. And ever since then, I never stopped. Once I got the discipline of writing every day, I've just enjoyed it so much that less than 3 years later and 500,000 published words later, I was able to quit my day job and actually be an author full time. I really love doing it. I learned a lot about indie publishing in the beginning, Kindle and then paperback in the Create Space days. Then I learned how to publish hardcover editions and finally audio editions, which brings us to today. Everything that I learned about all this actually helped me even start a small press of my own. So it's a cooperative small press created by authors for authors. That turns out to be really fun. All of those topics, I could spend a whole hour talking about each of them. Hardcover, the small press, everything. But today, specifically, we're going to be talking about audiobooks. All right, so the talk today is going to go pretty much like this. I'm going to start off with talking about how I got personally interested in audio. This was way before I was an author, a long time ago, discovering how much I personally loved audio, and I wasn't the only one. Then I'll talk about, why authors should bother with an audio edition. It's added expense, it's a lot of work, it has nothing to do with writing, and I'll talk about why it's important, why it's valuable to actually do audio editions. Then I'll talk about my own story, about how I got started, the details associated with that, which is where we'll start to learn about how to create an audio edition, nuts and bolt wise. And then in the end, I'll talk about my current methodology. It's a well-oiled machine right now. Everything I write ends up in audio in the end, even the short stories that I do. And I'll talk about the value added associated with those. Now, like many people, I had a long commute. Well, it's really interesting how many of the people that really got into audio editions in the beginning was because they were driving so much. I really had, when I was working full time, I had a job that I would spend hours in traffic every day. Route 66, a minimum of an hour each direction. And I, like many other people, spend a lot of time listening to audiobooks there because it takes those hours and makes them productive in some way, makes them enjoyable, makes you not get to work and get home annoyed about everything. It just makes the quality of life a lot better. Plus, I was going through 2 or 3 books a week when I was doing my commute. Where I started with those, it's really a funny story. Way back when it was books on tape, in the neighborhood where I grew up, and this was like in the 80s, the place I used to buy gas all the time was a truck stop. You know, one of those huge truck stops where all the 18-wheelers would stop. And they had showers and, you know, food and all kinds of stuff, but they also had these kiosks that had books on tape. It's really funny because they were kind of like Pulp Fiction. They were, you know, the executioner or the survivalist. And it's really funny because the truckers would get these books on tape, and then they could trade them in and they would get resold. And it was really interesting premise. And I started listening to them then, and they were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. And then as time went by and I was older and I got married and had kids, it's really funny. My kids are adults, grown-ups, and moved out now and stuff. But when they were young, they loved to listen to audiobooks in the van. I mean, this is vans back before. It seems like every van now has a DVD player in it so kids can watch Disney movies and stuff. But back then, my kids really, really, really loved audiobooks in the van. We went through every Harry Potter book, unabridged, on tape, inside the van, more than once. And then once my kids were really into that, we discovered that the libraries offered books on tape, and even children's books on tape. And so we listened to so many titles, all of the Redwall books. I don't know if you've read any of those. They're really, really awesome. And I really grew to appreciate audiobooks, listening to them with my children. Audio books on tape turned into CDs and turned into MP3s. The library was a great source for me on my commutes initially. And I could listen to all the Lawrence Block books, and it was really great. Time I started buying audiobooks at McKay's and a lot of other places. And then eventually they became streaming services. A lot of the audiobooks like Audible, and even the library has a streaming service that I love to use. It's called Overdrive. You should check it out. I actually have some titles out there. It's a great app that I run on my iPhone, and you actually can check out audiobooks based on your search criteria. It's really, really great app. So that's how I really, really explain that audiobooks really came up for my personal interest all before I became an author. So why do an audio edition? Most authors, when they start looking into doing an audio edition for one of those works, they're absolutely deterred in the beginning because they go look for services to help them do it, and it turns out that they're very, very expensive for a lot of the secondary services to do it. A lot of the work that's associated with it has nothing to do with writing. There's a lot of business process associated with it, and they're completely daunted about it. And the big reason I wanted to do an audio edition of my first book after it was published is because I was such a fan of audio. Nobody in my writers group had ever done an audiobook production. I was lucky enough that through my author networking, I knew an author from at work that was published and had used the service called acx.com, and that actually lit a fire under me because the technology was able to do it. And I found that there's a really good reason for doing audiobooks, is because there's a whole new audience for audiobooks, because there's a lot of people, the only books that they really buy, the only books that they really read are via audio. I was really surprised to discover that. My own family, a lot of the people in my own family never read any of my books until they were released on audio. And once I started the production process, I discovered I really, really enjoyed it a lot. Producing an audiobook is actually a lot of fun. It was actually pretty amazing how it feels. It really made my audio or my writing process more real, because the books, when they're being professionally produced, they're like, it's amazing to me, the feeling that it has. It's a lot of fun. And then, you know, most notable is the money. I mean, the amount of money that they generate is an entirely new market, and it's just totally awesome. So how I got started in AudioWorks. In 2015, when I wrote my first novel and was published in March, I was immediately interested in trying to see if I could get it produced. There is a website called acx.com. This is currently a wholly owned subsidiary of Amazon, and it's really interesting website, because I kind of compare it to a dating website. After you get in, you have to log in and set up your profile. It's like everything that you had to do when you set up your Kindle books on KDP. Everything that you do there, you have to also do on ACX. All your tax information, so they can do 1099s, all of that. So once you get your profile all set up, it's kind of like a dating website. You put up a photo that's the cover of your book. You put up a synopsis of your book. You put in all kinds of metadata that represents the kind of narrator that you're interested in, male, female, the kind of voice that the narrator has, whether it's theatrical or has a British accent or is childlike. You can actually specify all that metadata within the interface. And then what happens, you upload an audition script. It's usually a section of your book that actually has a good representative performance of the kind of voice actor that you're looking for. So when I upload them, I usually upload a section that has dialogue, that has emotion, that has male and female characters within it, and is a little bit more complicated, so that the auditions can be very easily measured once they come in. And after I did all that, I took a chance and I decided, okay, I'm gonna set it up. And the way that it actually works is you put up the audition, and once you press go, it's just like a website, or just like a dating website. Narrators and producers out there look at your profile to see if they're interested in your property. And if they are interested, they will personally record an audition video or audio and upload it to the website so that you can review it. The last audiobook that I did, I had over 100 auditions, and that was the most that I ever had. I think that's because during the days of COVID, that a lot of people are working from at home, and a very common job from at home now is being a narrator. So all of these auditions come rolling in, and you get to listen to them and compare them back and forth. You can pick your favorites, and then in the end, you can let your auditions roll as long as you like. I usually let them go for 3 or 4 weeks, so I can get the greatest variety of auditions that come in. There's things in the interface that you can specify how much you want to pay, the kind of contract you want to associate with your narrators. And they are two basic kinds. The first of which is per finished hour contracts. That's where you state in the interface, I want to pay $50 or $100 per finished hour. That means they deliver the audio to you and you pay them by the time that the book takes for them to narrate. So for instance, if you have a 10-hour audiobook and your offer is $100 per finished hour, it would cost you $1,000. So the per finished hour rate can vary widely. It can go from $50 per finished hour to thousands and thousands of dollars per finished hour. I mean, there's celebrities in there that you can get to narrate your novel if you're willing to pay enough money. The other kind of contract that you can get for the narrators that are doing your book is called a royalty share agreement. Now, in the beginning, when I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't even sure that this whole writing thing was going to work out, I selected a narrator for a royalty share agreement. What this does is you don't pay any money up front to your narrators, but you split the royalties with them for 7 years. And that is a whole different kind of scenario for narrators to judge your work and record your work. And it's really interesting because I was really lucky. I won't even pretend that I haven't been lucky this entire time. My first novel, it hit #1 in the hard science fiction category on Amazon. The narrator that I ultimately selected actually bought a copy of my book and actually read it. And the reason why he selected my book to read as an audio edition is because he actually believed it had legs. This is the term that he used. That means he thought it would make money. And if it would make him money, it'll make me money. So I was really glad for that. His name is Andrew Tell, and he actually recorded my first 3 novels with a royalty share agreement. And I have found that to be a very beneficial relationship. I learned a lot about ACX and audio editions. I learned a lot from Andrew about how the industry works. And it turns out, once again, super lucky, I discovered that some narrators have their own fan base. And I can see that. Some narrators have people that buy their books simply because of who the narrator is. And that helps a lot. And if you have a royalty share agreement, one of the other benefits is the narrator himself now has a vested interest in your book. And with a vested interest, they help with the marketing aspects associated with it too. So especially at the beginning of my career, I found that to be very valuable because suddenly my books were a lot more popular than they may have been. The word got out a lot wider, and I learned how to market audiobooks in addition to that. So that was very, very useful. And I was so lucky to have landed that way. It really taught me a lot. Although now all the books that I do, I actually pay per finished hour. One, most notably, because I can afford it now. And I can afford really good narrators, because the more money that you can pay per finished hour, your narrators are better. And two, the royalties are higher. Had I, for my initial books, gotten all the royalties, I would have made a lot more money. Maybe. But now I do it strictly per finished hour. I pay up front. The way ACX works, you get 40% of the cover price as your royalty for every edition made. So So that's really great. In fact, my last audiobook, I actually hired 2 narrators. It cost more, but it was definitely worth it. They actually did a duet in that audiobook, and it was really came out so much better. So the way my current practice works, audio editions are built into the machine that I use, that I create. I really do call it a machine because it really is running in greased grooves now. And this starts with writing the book and then editing the book, having it professionally edited and beta reviewed and modified and finished. It's published out first in Kindle and then paperback and then hardcover. And at the same time, once the finished version of the book is done, that's when I start the ACX process to generate an audiobook, because that in fact takes a little bit. Some people defer their release of their audio or their entire book until the audio edition is complete. I don't do that. I just release them as soon as they're available. One of the big reasons for that is it's like a new edition release. You can actually have release parties, and it actually is a lot of fun when you are marketing for the audio editions to get released. And I have found a really, really interesting thing about when they're released. The actual Kindle edition, paperback, hardcover, and audio, each of those has a separate audience. There is a lot of people out there that only buy hardcover editions. There is people that only do Kindle editions, and that's great. And there is a large segment of population that only buy audio editions. The audiences are completely different, and by putting out an audio edition, it serves a market that you might not otherwise attain. That's a business end. That's a whole different talk to have. We could talk for an hour about all the ways to make money as an indie author. But all of my novels now, each of those has an audio edition. I have actually expanded that to do audio editions of all the short stories I do as well. The technology, as technology changes and goes forward, the process has changed, and I'm trying to keep up with it. As an example of my last novel that I had put in audio, usually what happens with the ACX interface, as the audio narrator completes a chapter, they will upload it chapter by chapter. The author has approval for each individual chapter. You listen to it, you detect errors, and that's particularly notable in science fiction with weird planet names or potentially weird people names, things like that. My narrators are really great about checking in advance how to pronounce things. I will regularly send MP3 recordings of names, how to pronounce them, places, things like that. And even to the point where if they're doing voices within their narration, the accents that you prefer, the Texas drawl or a New England accent or British accent, things like that, you can actually detail that information for the narrator. In the last book that I did, I used the duet, as I mentioned before, and these 2 narrators, one of them lived in Canada, one of them lived in North Carolina. And there's this tool and website out there called Discord. It was actually created by gamers so that they could talk back and forth, but these narrators actually used it as a tool so that they could collaborate while they were recording my book. And I could participate while they were recording. the benefits from this were far, far more than I thought they were going to be initially, because it's actually interesting. They were both in their recording booths on each end, you know, the soundproof booths with their advanced microphones and everything. And I was there in a video conference with the two of them. As they were reading it, I got to watch the sausage getting made. The mistakes would be made, the re-recording. The advantages for them, though, is that they didn't have to wait until I reviewed a recording to get feedback. I was right there. If they had a question, they would just ask me. And it made the process a lot easier and faster for them. The faster it is for them, the faster it gets done. The faster it gets done, the quicker it gets released. And everybody turns out happy at that point. Let's see. So today, I actually even record my short stories, some of which I have done professionally. I'll put them out on ACX or engage an audio narrator and pay them separately. But I have discovered that the short stories, I have begun to use them as a tool for marketing. It's really interesting how I kind of call it the drug dealer model of marketing, because you can actually put something out there for free and then people can download them and listen to them and become more interested in the actual audiobooks that you are offering. So now I record all my stories in audio. In addition, not just the novels, also the short stories. And I've actually even expanded into trying my own hand at recording audio stories. I've started narrating. I actually have several out here that I have narrated personally. One summer, 2 summers ago, I had a summer intern working for me. And he was a really smart kid going to George Mason University. And he set up for me a home studio setup, including the software and recommended microphones and technology for that. By the way, the software that I use to record it is a shareware tool called Audacity. You can download it for free. Anybody can do that. He also hooked me up with some Teleprompter software, the kind that scrolls up and you can read it a lot easier. And I found that to be very valuable because it controls the pace at which you read. I tend to talk really fast. And if I'm reading my book, I would go incredibly super fast. And it's amazing how nervous you get. So this would actually control the pace that you would be able to read it. So I ended up recording several of my own stories that I have published. They're all on my website and you can get to them for free. And it turned out to be a lot of fun. I'll probably do more of it in the future. It's pretty funny though. I had to get a good microphone and I didn't have a recording studio or anything. Some narrators, they actually have like a closet in their house that they've lined with quilts, and they'll sit in there to stop all the ambient noise. I didn't have that in my den where I was working. I simply got a really good headset microphone, the kind where the mic's right in front of your mouth, and that allowed me to cut out a lot of the ambient noise because the microphone was not omnidirectional. But it was a really good microphone. It's really funny. And some of them, you could hear my cat meow. You could hear it when my air conditioning turned on. So professionals really, really, really know what they're doing. And with the Audacity software, sometimes you can cut that stuff out, sometimes you can't. And it's actually a kind of a fun exercise. But once again, a lot of writers don't want to do it because, once again, it's not writing, it's completely something else. And if I wasn't careful, it could be very distracting and a real tool for self-sabotage and procrastination. So I currently leave it all to the pros to do the audio recordings of my short stories. It works out better. You have to also keep in mind that ACX themselves, the website, they have audio standards. You have to record your audiobooks if you're going to do it yourself. You have to record them with a minimum amount of audio standards. The website can explain all the details to that much better than I can. But I highly recommend Audacity and a good teleprompter software if you are really interested in doing that. So I think in the amount of time that we have there, I just want to touch lightly on a lot of lessons learned, because there is a million little tiny working parts for this whole thing. I'm skimming over them pretty quick, but it'll literally take you, quite a while to actually figure this out to the point that you'll be comfortable with it. I highly encourage you to do it, but I just wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the fine print, some of the details, some of the lessons learned. Number one is that there are real contracts involved here. And you are signing contracts that will do monetary obligations. I am not a lawyer, but I highly recommend having one. Look over your contracts to see if they meet things that are amenable to you. So I say that all the time. If you're going to sign a contract with somebody, make sure the terms are clear, make sure you understand them. It's not like your terms of service for Facebook where everybody just clicks OK and goes forward. Take the time, have a lawyer read them and look at it. In addition to that, there is also a whole business end of this thing. This is most notable because there's going to be taxes involved, 1099s. If all goes well, like it has for me, because I have been super lucky, I will just note that this year, for the first year ever since I started becoming an author, audiobooks was my #1 revenue source of all of my different editions. So I highly encourage everybody to do audio editions because the market is vast and it's still growing and I love it. The way you market audiobooks is completely different. Be careful though, because there's taxes involved and 1099s, and if you are lucky, those are problems you want to have. How to handle your taxes and stuff like that. I ended up getting an accountant to do it, and that has been so worth it. So now I have an accountant and an attorney instead of an agent. One of the other things, I know several traditionally published authors. If you're interested in doing traditional publishing, audio editions are also a big factor there. The difference is a traditionally published author has very little to say in the audiobook. Typically, they don't get to pick the narrator. They don't review the ultimate publication of it, and they benefit from the sales, but they have very little influence. If you are a control freak like me, and you like to control everything from cover to content to everything, acx.com is really the right place for you. I'll keep in mind that all these things do take time, a lot of time, and you have to be able to devote the time. When I was working full-time, I still managed to do it. My first novel, as I mentioned, Still Falling, was released March 31st. The audio edition of that novel was released August 31st. So it can be done, even if you're working full-time and your time is at a premium. The thing about audiobooks is I've learned that for every finished hour of audio in an audiobook, it takes about 6 hours to create it, to do the recording, to do the editing, to do the reviewing. It takes about 6-to-1 ratio to get them through. I also have found that marketing is completely different for audiobooks. Marketing is the single biggest challenge I have. I have lucked into all of the marketing successes that I have done, but I have ultimately found that the best marketing is to write the next book. Because if the books keep coming out, if the machine keeps running and grease grooves, that's your best marketing, because somebody will listen to one book and suddenly they buy them all. In fact, that's how I do it. If I find an author I like, next thing you know, I buy all their audiobooks. I'm currently on like book 17 of the Dresden Files. So the through purchases is really good for audio editions. And you just need to take the time. So I'm putting on my contact information here. It'll be still there in the recording of this session. We can also just email me at any time or check my website out. I am happy to talk with indie published authors that are trying to figure stuff out. I never had anybody to help me, hack my way through the jungle for the first time. I'd rather have a paved sidewalk for people to come through behind me. I'm happy to help. I will work for coffee. It'll happen. So just contact me if you have any, if you want to get together, you need a bigger amount of time than our question session will cover. But before we head out, I will, before questions, I'll just make a crass commercial announcement. All my books are in audio. The first 3 books, you can get all 3 of them combined in one audio edition. They call them box sets, for one price, or for 1 Audible credit if you are a member of Audio. 36 hours of action-packed adventure. All my books are in audio, so go on, check them out. Some are 2 hours long. One stamp is 2 hours long, and they typically run about 9 or 10 hours. So with that said, we have any questions?
There's a bunch of questions in the chat.
Okay, when I was doing this, I couldn't see the chat. So let's look them over.
I know. Why don't you, can you see the chat? Okay, I'll let you go through and answer.
I can see the chat now. Let's see. Why not read your own? It's hard. It is really hard. I know some authors that read all their own audiobooks. Some of them, my favorites, are like Stephen King. He does a great job at it. It's really great. One, it's a good idea. You need to figure out how to do it. You need to figure out if you have a good audio voice, your diction, the way that you pronounce stuff. I have a horrible problem with saying all the time. In this recording, I probably said it 1,000 times. And it's really interesting. With Audacity, you can go through and edit those out. And I had to do that when I recorded my own. So yes, you can record your own. And it turns out to be a lot cheaper, because then you don't have to pay a narrator, which makes that even more awesome on ACX. If you've recorded your own audiobook and your quality is high enough to meet the sound standards for ACX, that's a really great scenario for profit margin. So that's all good. Then the only cost is time to do it. How do you become a narrator? You just become a narrator. To break into it, if you really want to, you can set up a profile on acx.com as a narrator. And a lot of people do that. I actually have worked with some beginning narrators who are at the beginning of their career and are looking for jobs. And those are the ones that you can actually get for $50 per finished hour. And that is an opportunity for both of you. So if you put a book out there for $50 per finished hour, and you send it out, you will get auditions in for people that are at the beginning of their career. And if you want to do that, it's easy enough to get started. The things I would do if I were you, set up Audacity, get a really good microphone, and I would set up a recording booth that is as soundproof as you can make it. And it's crazy how soundproof it has to be. The ambient sounds are amazing when you start listening to them. Even now, I can hear birds chirping outside, which would not work if I was recording my audiobook. So you can become a narrator. Now, I've tried it myself. I haven't, submitted anything to ACX, but recording it yourself, you don't actually, if you're doing it like I did, and you want to just do freebies, you can put them up in SoundCloud, or all of my stuff I have published onto YouTube, and that has actually worked out to good effect.
If I could interject for a moment, in Front Royal, there's a great recording studio. It's called National something or other. I did a CD there, and they do rent space, and they have the technicians and everybody to help you. So if any of you become interested in that, let me know, and I'll go dig up the name and contact info. Yeah,
that's a great option for people. Once again, it's costs money if you're trying to do it for cost effectiveness. How much does it cost to rent studio time there per hour?
I honestly can't remember because I did this some years ago, but it is like $50 an hour probably. I'd have to check it out because I don't want to lie to you.
Right. I know some recording artists that are musicians that rent studio time and stuff like that. It's probably the same kind of setup.
That is actually the primary thing they do. It's run by musicians as well as a well-known entrepreneur in the Chamber of Commerce out here. So.
Yep. Yeah, in the chat, I didn't know Peter Dinklage narrated books. That's awesome. A lot of actors. Andrew Tell, he's actually a Hollywood actor. He lives in Burbank. Will Wheaton is one of my favorite narrators. He narrated Ready Player One. The guy that rented Harry Potter, his name's Jim Dale. I love that guy. He is great with voices. It is a real talent to do that. What is the name of the teleprompter software I used? It was called Teleprompter. And it's a shareware software. You can probably Google that up pretty quick. It's the copy I have, I don't think is available anymore because it's like line mode DOS. And I think it's been upgraded several times since had there, but there is lots of them available. It's really interesting. You can control how fast the text goes up. You can mirror the text so that you can have it reflected on glass. So if you're looking at a camera directly, stuff like that, it's pretty interesting, the software, the way all that works. Let's see. Does ACX offer templates with standard contracts? Yes, they do. The templates are out there. You can actually review them before you even decide what kind of contract you want to do. And I recommend that you do that. But once again, there's a lot of lawyerese in there. And the royalty share agreement in particular is more complicated. And it's the exit clauses that are very complicated in the royalty share agreement, and they've changed over time. So I recommend getting a lawyer. I'm not going to make any specific recommendations about what kind of contract to take. Just have a lawyer look them over for you. Let's see what else. Yeah, a lot of people love audiobooks. Jack Reacher, Clive Cussler, all those things are so great. Yeah, keep the machine moving. That is it's actually really, I think that the machine is one of the things that has marked my success, that has taken me from just some dude that, loves science fiction, write a science fiction book, to a full-time author. Now it takes me about 12 weeks to write a novel. It takes me about another 12 weeks to polish that, have it edited, get it ready for formatting, interior covers, all the rest of it. Another 12 weeks, so that's resulting in about 2 novels a year, and then short stories on top of that, and that includes the audio editions and all of that. But the machine, running through it over and over and over again, every time I run through, it gets easier. In fact, I'm currently working on the second draft of my most recent novel. I should have that finished by the end of this month, and should go to the editor. And I find that I'm a better writer. My first novel, oh my God, I had to edit out so much in that thing, and my spelling, grammar, and punctuation is so horrible. Now, granted, my spelling, grammar, and punctuation still ain't great. Commas are my enemy, but that's why you hire a professional editor. So I highly recommend that. Let's see, what else we got here? What is the process in terms of creating packaging, covers, and so forth, aside from recording procedures? Audio covers actually require different formatting. And in fact, when I also pay for professional covers, professional illustrators, cover designers, all of that. And as part of the contract, when I in the selection process for covers, I have the hardcover edition, the paperback edition, the Kindle edition, and the Audible edition. Most notably with the Audible edition, it's square, not rectangular. And that is notable when you are creating it. Some people, just like squash their cover down. It doesn't look great. But if you have it professionally designed for a square format, it's really important, because when some guy's on the train, he just finished his audiobook, and he starts browsing audio, looking for Audible for the next book, the cover is the very first marketing tool that'll catch an eye, and that'll get them to read the blurb, which is your second marketing tool. I can do a whole
I'm sorry to interrupt again. That same company, National whatever it is, also does that. They did that for a CD for me with formatting the cover. It's very, very specific, and with many iterations. And they also sell the paraphernalia. If you have, like, you want a T-shirt with your book cover and an image on it, they can do that, or mugs or whatever. So no, they have not paid me for this. I forgot we were talking about this.
Yeah, so it's a whole thing. The actual, that's an entire hour's worth of talk, just designing and working on covers and the various kinds of covers. It's a really good question, and covers are incredibly important. And indie authors in particular, it's a lesson that they need to learn, because an amateur cover will be off-putting. You could have the best story in the world, and if your cover is not good, people will just page by it. It's too easy to be on the train looking for a book and say, amateur cover, forget it, I'm not spending my money. But if you got a great cover and a great blurb, the guy in the train who is a grown-up with one click, and he's listening to your book a minute later. And that's really valuable, really, really super valuable to understand, because in the end, I'm a mercenary about the whole thing. Now that I'm a full-time author, I spend a portion of every day thinking about the mercenary business side of being an author, which is something a lot of self-published authors have a hard time with, and they've got to reconcile with if you want to do it as a job, because in fact, it is a job. And I'll highly emphasize that in all my talks. So let's see what else we got. Okay, any more questions? Yeah, you can just jump right in if you want, unmute your mics and just scream real loud.
I was going to ask you about your short stories. Where are you publishing them on Kindle and such too, as
Yes.
free?
Yes, I do. And in fact, there's a couple different ways you can do that. Amazon has actually changed their policies, and they keep changing. They used to allow you to publish things for free on Amazon. And now they'll only allow you to publish one perma-free story if it's related to one of your books that are for sale on Amazon. So I only have one title that's for free on my Amazon author page, short story in Kindle. But I also use a service called Smashwords, smashwords.com. And it's a place where you can publish any kind of works that you want and make them free. So my short stories for Kindle editions and EPUB and all of the various places, they also make them available for free to libraries there too, which I also like, because
How do you get paid from a library?
well, man, that's a topic in itself. But basically, libraries, if they buy your books, they'll buy a quantity of them, and that's how you get paid. But you know, you don't get paid per read on your.
That's what I was
library.
wondering.
Yeah, it's you know, in the indie published world, it's kind of controversial topic, because you know some authors consider it like a copyright violation. Hey, you didn't pay for my intellectual property. Why are you listening to it? Some authors won't sell their books to libraries. I look at it like marketing. I don't think the penetration is enough to actually cripple me. There is a lobby out there that says, okay, I'll let libraries buy my books, but make it so that I don't have to pay taxes on that title, because I'll let the people read it for free from the library. I'm cool with that. It's interesting. One of my experiments, one of my titles, I had translated into Spanish and published it. I had done some research. I had found that Spanish was the second largest alternate language market, the first market being Chinese. The problem is the Chinese, they copyright violate everything. And it costs you 10 times as much to have it translated into Chinese. So I hired Spanish translator. I had Virtues of the Vicious translated to Spanish. I had to hire a Spanish editor to make sure that the translation was appropriate, and the spelling, grammar, and punctuation, which is subtly different, it was all right. And I published that in Kindle and paperback, and the sales were not there. You know, I was like thinking, oh, I'll never make back, you know, it'll take me years to make back the money it cost me for translation and editing of that, until I published the hardcover edition. It turns out libraries across the United States are dying for Spanish fiction, genre fiction in particular. So most of the sales of the Spanish edition of Virtues of the Vicious are being sold to libraries. I'm going, why are all these people buying 2 copies of my book all the time? And I'm sure that it got into some library catalog out there somehow or another, and it started selling a lot for libraries. I'm a big supporter of libraries. I love libraries. My entire life, I love libraries. So I don't mind the libraries selling my editions. In fact, their Overdrive app has several of my stories in there. That's where you can get Kindle and Audible books for free. Now, they'll only have a couple of versions out there, and two people can't be listening to it at the same time, for instance.
Right.
So
Scribd.
that's a great thing about libraries.
Scribd is another one I'm using because it's cheaper than Audible. Have you heard of that?
Cheaper how?
Cheaper for me, the reader.
Ah, yes. I have not heard of it.
Yeah,
So I haven't tried it. It's called Scribd.
Yeah, Scribd. So it might be something to look into. Several friends referred me to it because every book they wanted to find on Audible, Scribd had, and the subscription price is a lot cheaper. And you know how you get an Audible credit? On Scribd, you pay your monthly fee and you can read as many books as you can get through. So
Audiobooks, you mean?
Excuse me?
Audiobooks?
Audiobooks.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love that whole premise because it's like Netflix for books. That's awesome. I love that. And if they had that for audiobooks, I could see that being valuable if you're going through a lot of audiobooks every month.
Yeah, that's what Scribd does. And I do. I mean, I go for a walk, I read my book. I have an hour commute each way, I read a book. I live alone, I'm doing something around the house, I'm reading a book. So, because I don't like to waste time.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the Audible interface on Alexa. So all you have to do is say out loud, Alexa, read my audiobook, and it'll do it. And it remembers where you are. And if you have WhisperSync installed, that's really an interesting feature where I love reading paper books. I love reading Kindle. I like reading Kindle because if I'm reading in bed, I can have my Kindle on backlit and not disturb my wife who's sleeping. And if I'm reading on Kindle and I have WhisperSync turned on with the audiobook, it remembers where I left off. And vice versa. I love that. It's nice living in the future.
Yeah. Any other questions for Martin? Thank you so much. I always learn so much. I got 3 pages of notes. I always learn a lot when you...
Yeah, if anybody has any extra questions that they think about or they just want to chat about it, shoot me an email. I'm happy to always chat with other authors, especially if there's coffee involved. I'm all about the coffee. Drink coffee, make stuff up, people send you money. That's awesome.
And we will put this recording up on our website. And John Dutton's asking what the name of your company is.
It's Tannhauser Press.
And don't forget, you want to be in our upcoming anthology. I put the information on Facebook today. Okay, and we'll see you guys next month.
I'll add an interesting note. I just my most recent audio edition is an anthology that I had that Tannhauser Press had put together about time travel short stories, and that anthology, I just finished up the production on it. It's currently in review at ACX. I hope it's out in a couple weeks. And that'll be my 11th book on audio, and I'm looking forward to that.
That's a really great idea for our anthology.
I know.
I highly recommend it. And in fact, after the fact, the anthology participants said, "Hey, maybe the next anthology, each of the authors can read their own short story." And it can be compiled into an anthology and released on audio. That'd be really fun, especially if whoever's putting it together has got a recording studio, because short stories are easier. I have a story in that anthology that's only like 10 minutes long, and it's really fun. It's great.
Martin, this is so helpful. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share what you know with all of us.
You're welcome. I enjoy it. I really, really enjoy it.
Me too. I enjoyed this greatly. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll type Tannhauser Press in the chat so you can know how it's spelled.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And we will see you guys next month. I don't remember what the topic is. Catherine just asked me to do this earlier in the week, so I didn't really get as much information together, but I wanted to focus on today with Martin and also our anthology due by March 31st. Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody. See
It
you
was
next
fun.
month. Bye-bye.